Hello, this is your host, Chuck Lee of the Cow Report. Now, tonight is Monday night, October 24th, and I'm not going to be able to be with you tonight. I've got a very important live debate over UW River Falls. It started at 7 o'clock. We'll probably be ending up just about the time that this show starts. You know how I love to be there to keep the program rolling along smoothly and make sure there's no glitches, and we're always bringing you the finest programming on public access for the whole greater Eau Claire area. But I'm in a very close race, and we're moving up in the polls, and it's very important for me to attend those debates, to get my viewpoint across, and a lot of your viewpoints, too, because I know you agree with me on a lot of issues. So I want to thank you for your continued support over the years, and thank you for tuning into the Cow Report week after week, and making those live phone calls and listening to all of our great guests, all the way from the governor to who knows. We've had a lot of different people on. We've had Jim Grainbelt on, Kung Fu Garbage Cop, and we just had many wonderful guests. Of course, I got my trusty sidekick Fred, the true Stafford, who will be with you to help you out tonight. So please stay tuned to the next hour of the Cow Report, and please remember me on November 8th. Like I say, this is a very close race, and every vote counts, so I would appreciate your vote and your support. And may God bless you. And we'll see you again right here on the Cow Report next week. So pay attention now and make those calls. Goodbye.
Welcome to this election forum featuring the candidates for Wisconsin's 3rd Congressional District. I'm Gene Purcell, the program director at WLSU La Crosse Public Radio, inviting you to stay tuned for about the next 2 hours as we explore some of the issues in that race and hear from each of the 4 candidates who are with us tonight. They include Chuck Lee, an independent candidate from Eau Claire, Steve Gunderson, the Republican incumbent, Mark Weinholt, an independent candidate from Colfax, and Harvey Stour, the Democratic candidate from Amory. Before we get underway with tonight's forum, let me run down the rules for the forum, rules which I will be enforcing firmly yet fairly. First, each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement, and the starting order was determined by lot before the program. Questions from our panel tonight will then begin, and candidates will answer in the same order. The first candidate to answer a question will have 2 minutes to respond, and the following candidates will have 1 1/2 minutes to respond. After 3 questions have been asked, each candidate will have 2 minutes to rebut any of the previous questions or to expand on another one of their answers, and they will also have the option to pass if they so wish. And finally, we'll try to make time for closing statements, and I may have to adjust the time of those, though, to fit our 2-hour limit, so we'll see how that turns out. Now I'd like to introduce the panelists who are with us tonight. They include Dia Olson with the League of Women Voters of La Crosse County, and Sandra Harris with WLSU La Crosse Public Radio. We'll move on now to opening statements. As I mentioned, the order was determined by lot just before the program, and Chuck Lee came up number 1.
Thank you, Gene. Thank you to the Wisconsin Technical College and to the League of Women Voters for putting on this debate tonight. And I want to welcome the audience, the viewer audience, and the studio audience. The reason I got in this race is because I believe the time for change is now in the 3rd Congressional District. The incumbent has been in office for approximately 14 years. And when you stay in office that long, you become part of the problem because you create laws that protect yourself, and the Congress itself becomes like a cocoon. And the outside forces that would work against defeating the incumbent are lacking. It's very hard to climb that hill and to beat the incumbent. And the reason is because, mainly because of the political action committees and the special interests. And they do have a special interest in keeping the person that's in there because of the seniority system that's in place now. It's to the political action committee's benefit to continue to give large amounts of money to the incumbents. And therefore, short of the incumbent dying or retiring, over 90% of them continue to be reelected year after year. Now, hopefully, this year things will be different. There is a strong anti-incumbency mood in the country and in the 3rd District from my travels in the 3rd District. And I would like to just ask people to remember that the government is you and I. And it's not the special interests, it's not the Monsantos, the Tyson Foods, it's the farmers, the laborers, the unemployed, the young and the old, and the rich and the poor. And hopefully, all of us working together, we can make Washington respond once again to the needs and wants of the constituents in the 3rd Congressional District. Thank you very much.
The panel, and if time permits, I may ask a question or two myself. We'll start, though, with a question from Dia Olson. And
my first question is, would you support a bill that would stop passage of unfunded federal mandates if adequate funding mechanisms have not been identified? What do you see as the pros or cons of this legislation?
Last answer to the question on mandates from Chuck Lee.
Can I correct something first? I'm not an independent. I'm with the U.S. Taxpayers Party, and we are a bona fide, one of the big 3 here in the state. We are a state party now, ballot qualified. So anyway, unfunded mandates is a big problem in the United States because we've conditioned the citizens of this country to think in terms of government being big mommy and big daddy, and that they've just got a wallet that is just continually full of money. And so we've got 3 generations, 4 generations in a row now that are geared towards looking to Washington to supply every one of our needs and to fix every problem. Well, the only problem is in a certain time in history, you have to decide when you're going to cut off government and allow the local governments to take care of citizens of their states and not rely on the United States government. But some of the big unfunded mandates, we could start with Congress. The Congressional, Steve Gunderson's in Congress, and they have their own private stationery store and their own health club facilities, and they have their own airline ticket office. We can start right there with cutting some of the perks and specials that they get that don't trickle down to the rest of us. I mean, I can't go to that stationery store and shop. Only Steve can because he's in Congress. They also get a special tax deduction for housing of $3,000. And consider the franking privilege. Steve is one of the top 20% of the House members for the use of free stamps to mail out to the constituents, and the taxpayers pay for that. But we definitely have too many unfunded mandates. We have to start thinking in terms of...
Okay, I'm afraid I'll have to cut you off. We'll move on now to a question from Sandra Harris.
We hear from voters that they have a litmus test before they will vote for a candidate, and that is in regard to abortion, reproductive rights. What specifically is your stance on reproductive rights, reproductive choice, I should say? Why do you hold that opinion, and in what circumstances might you change it?
We move on then. The next answer from Chuck Lee.
My personal position is that I think that the only time that an abortion should be performed is when the mother is actually in serious trouble. She might die. Otherwise, I don't think that there should be abortion on demand. I don't think the federal government should even be in the abortion business, other than proper education to teach people exactly what is inside of the woman, instead of saying it's just a handful of flesh and it's not really a human being. Now, Mr. Stour, they say he's about 80% pro-life, so that would mean that he'd be willing to kill 20 out of 100 babies. Steve Gunderson is about 75% pro-life, so he'd be willing to kill about 25 out of 100. Mark Weinholz is 100% pro-abortion, so he's willing to kill 100 of every 100 babies. And in the case of the life of the mother, it'd be more like about 1 out of every 100. I also say no to RU 486. I think that's there's a lot of problems with that pill. It's showing up over in Europe now, but it will create an abortion clinic in every bathroom in the United States if that stuff is flooded into the country. So I say no to that. And also, another abortifacient, the Norplant is showing a lot of serious side effects now. So we got to watch out how government gets involved in these types of issues, because there could be lawsuits and other things of that nature.
Okay, we move on to the next question, and I'll take the opportunity to ask that. Earlier in this campaign, I was talking with the people who would be setting up the set for this, and I said we're not going to have any problems with crowds on stage because we'll only have 2 candidates once it gets close to election time. And it looks like I dropped the ball on that, because I've never seen 4 candidates this close to the November election for this seat. And my question to each of you is, why is that? Why do we have 4 candidates sitting up here? Huckley has the next answer.
Well, a recent AP poll, it was October 7th through 11th, showed that only 35% of the incumbents deserve to be reelected. That was margin of error of just a few points either way. So there's a strong anti-incumbency out there, but there's also just an undercurrent, a wave, whatever you want to call it, that's just sweeping across the landscape, that people are saying they don't want to do business as usual anymore. They're tired of the heavy burden of taxes and government interfering in every segment of their lives, and they want to be free of that. They want more freedom to decide what to do with their spendable income, instead of having to pay for every little bill that is introduced and passed in Washington. It's out of the constituents' pockets. So I think that people are ready for a change, and as Harvey said, you're seeing this all over the country, and it's going to continue from now on. It's no longer just the 2 monoliths of the Republican and Democratic parties. It's more now of more on issues. People aren't just lining up and saying, yeah, I'm a Democrat because my dad voted Democrat, I'm going to vote that way. Ross Perot interjected a kind of a new flavor into things now, so he's kind of created a third-party atmosphere. And so I think from now on we will see lots of competition in all of the races. It's no longer a given that it's going to be a 2-party race.
All right, we've gone through 3 questions now, and we've come to that portion of the program where it's time for a rebuttal period. And just to refresh your memory, there's a minute and a half allowed for that. You can speak pretty much in anything you wish. Chuck Lee goes first.
Well, one of the things I forgot to remind people is that there's 2 pro-life groups in Wisconsin, and Harvey's received the endorsement from Right to Life Wisconsin, but Pro-Life Wisconsin unfortunately cannot give a open endorsement, but in their comparison sheet that they sent out, they named me as the only candidate in the 3rd district that supports the Paramount Human Life Amendment, and that is the paramount right to life is vested in each human being from the moment of fertilization without regard to age, health, or condition of dependency. And I believe that, and they saw fit to list me as the one for that. But I want to get back to the unfunded mandates for a minute, and this might not exactly be an unfunded mandate, but in the case of Steve Gunderson, when he retires, he's got $1,636,000 estimated lifetime benefits coming. And if he retires at age 60, he gets a yearly salary of $46,396. Now, it's not just Steve. There's hundreds of retired House members and Senate members that are going to receive that kind of money. And they also get cost of living raises. So they're pretty well set for the rest of their lives, only after 14 years service. So Steve's looking pretty good there. But we need to whittle down the size of the special privileges for
Okay, I'm afraid I'll have to cut you off. Steve Gunderson is next.
Chuck, I don't know what comic book you're reading. The fact is that every member of Congress pays into Social Security like everybody else. I was there in Congress in 1982 when we required that every member of Congress had to pay into Social Security like every other American. Yes, members of Congress have opportunities to participate in pension plans, but there isn't a pension plan around in the federal government that comes in place until we reach the retirement age of, at the very earliest, 55. Most of them are at 65. Now, I'll guarantee you there is no plan out there that is going to give me $1 million in pension. If I wanted to get a pension, I would have not said I was going to retire in 2 years. I would have put in 20 years in the federal government, because that's when you meet that trigger that you get full retirement at the age of 55. I have done the worst possible thing for a federal pension plan, which is to quit after 16 years rather than 20. So, Chuck, I don't know where you get all this, but it's just unfortunately not true.
Over the last decade, reformers have focused on two key goals for welfare fixes: decreasing people's dependency on government benefits and helping AFDC recipients enter the workforce. Do you support limiting how long someone can be on the welfare rolls? If so, how much of an investment do you believe we need to make in job training, child care, and other programs to help welfare recipients find jobs?
I thought. Chuck Lee is the last response.
Okay, as far as welfare, there's a certain amount of the money that goes to the welfare system is spent on, or a lot of it is distributed out in the form of food stamps. Now, there's a lot of fraud in the food stamp program. As you saw, if you recall, in Milwaukee, 30, 40 stores were busted for trafficking in food stamps and trading them for alcohol and cigarettes. But also on the streets, they're used for trading narcotics, or they've even been used to purchase prostitutes. Well, the welfare system, people need a helping hand to get up out of welfare. But I think there should be graduated limits as to how long they can stay on. And one way of helping people get off of welfare is they have a lot of children at home. We can provide, some of the welfare recipients can take care of other welfare recipients' children, so that those recipients can go out and get training and schooling and to help them get off. But we need to stress training, but also another big issue is the illegal aliens that are flooding into this country, and they get in front of the line of other people that are deserving of welfare, and they're taking the benefits away from other people. And Barbara Jordan just did a study on that, and she says no to benefits for illegal aliens, and that's a good start. The Clinton administration is finally getting the idea of what's going on, and they're starting to close down the borders to stop the illegal alien problem.
All right, we're back to a question from Sandra Harris.
Each of you represents either a party with a very narrow to broader appeal to certain segments of the society, or a philosophy that has appeal in certain areas to certain segments of the society. I'm wondering, if you were elected to office, how do you think you would be able to fairly represent all of the constituents in the 3rd District, be they atheists, immigrants, people of various national origins, just the diversity of the people you represent, given your philosophy?
Moving on, Chuck Lee has the next response.
Well, you know, there's an old saying that it rains on the just and the unjust, and so in other words, you got a big district, you're going to have a diversity of races, creeds, colors, and young and old. You're going to be representing everybody that's in that 3rd District. And when it comes down to the issues that you're going to be looking at, you're going to get a lot of input from all the different various special interest groups and political action committees, but you don't have to be beholden to them, and you don't have to take legalized bribes underneath the table or above the table to vote a certain way. And in some cases, that's what happens when the big money starts rolling in. But when you're weighing the issues, and you have to finally make a decision of how you're going to vote on an issue, no matter what it is, and that's the way you got to vote. And sometimes you don't please everybody. And so I hope that I'll be able to vote and vote my conscience on all the issues and represent everybody of the 3rd District, no matter who they are.
All right, we've been talking a lot tonight about the domestic issues, but foreign policy has been in the news of late, and I'm just wondering what each of your assessment is of the current foreign policy of the administration, and what, if any, changes would you recommend as a member of Congress? From Chuck Lee.
Well, if you want to talk about unfunded mandates, you can just look at Haiti. In the case of Haiti, the United States government will spend at least $400 million to put a former priest and an advocate of necklacing back into office. Now, you can say it wasn't an invasion, but we've got 20,000 Americans down there right now. It's costing us $400 million, will be probably the final price tag. And I don't recall Steve voting on on the $400 million to go to Haiti. But I think the United States should have a policy of speak softly but carry a big stick. I mean, otherwise, we should be strong enough to take care of anyone that attacks us directly. But on the other hand, we shouldn't be world cops and world mercenaries. And we seem to be getting into a lot of areas that, like, take Japan and Europe. We've been there now for about 50 years. We're guarding Toyota in Japan, and we're guarding Volkswagen in Germany. They're two of the richest countries in the world, and we've got troops over there helping them defend their country. We don't need to take all the troops out. We should leave a tripwire amount of troops there in case there is something that happens, but by and large, we can get out of those two countries and let them fend for themselves. They're rich enough. And we can quit being the mercenaries and world cop.
All right, we've gone through our 3 questions. We're back to a minute-and-a-half rebuttal time for each candidate, and we'll be alternating those as well. The last opportunity for rebuttal in this round from Chuck Lee.
Well, Steve Gunderson earlier said that I had gotten my facts out of a comic book about his retirement plan. Well, actually, I got it out of a booklet called the Gravy Train Report. It was compiled by the U.S. Term Limits Group and also the National Taxpayers Union. And they list all the senators and representatives in the Congress today, tells how long they've been in office, when their term ends, when their pension begins, and their estimated lifetime benefits. By no means is Steve the highest, but he's up there. There's a lot.
When does my pension begin?
Your pension begins, Steve. If I can get it real quick here. I hate to be cutting into my time, but is this off of your time, Steve?
If they give me more, I'll use it. Sure.
Don't confuse me any more than I already am.
Okay, your pension begins in the year 2011. Okay, the other thing I want to talk about real quick was Mark Weinhold brought it up about, I think that the federal government should have a say-so about women having abortions. I think the federal government ought to get out of it, except for proper and truthful education about what's growing inside of a mother's womb, and revert it back to the states and make it a states' rights issue once again. So I just wanted to clear that up. But Steve, it's not a comic book. It's U.S. Term Limits. I'll let you look at it, but it's the only copy I got. I just got it in the mail today. And that tells about congressional pensions.
All right, we're back on the old question round here, and we'll move on now. A question from Dia Olson, and the first response will come from Chuck Lee.
The health debate officially got underway with President Clinton's promise of a health care that always is there. What health care reform measures do you support and why?
I am not in favor of turning 1/7 of our national economy over to the United States of America's government. If you look at any program that they've handled in the past, they're just not too good at running programs, and especially one that's that big. It would be the biggest bureaucratic boondoggle in the history of the world if the United States government took over that plan. I know at least one of my opponents thinks that the single-payer health care plan is the best way to go. Well, in Canada, they have that type of program, and they've got long waiting lists. I think upwards of 80,000 people waiting for operations. In Europe, in England, it's closer to 800,000 on waiting lists for operations and special procedures. That's what happens when you turn a program over to the United States government. It creates a massive bureaucracy and doesn't help anybody. I think a better way to deal with it would be to put in place caps on procedures. Like, for instance, a mother that's pregnant is going to have a baby. If that is pegged at $400, then you'd start at that year at $400. Next year, if there's a consumer price index of 5%, the price would go up to $420 for that procedure. Also, we need individual health accounts. We used to have the individual retirement account. Now we have the IHA that I'd like to see introduced that would allow each individual person to put money into that program for their own personal health care or for purchasing insurance that would be tax deductible. We also need to have 100% write-offs for any medical problems that we encounter in life, not just a certain percentage on your tax return. So if you couple those with more freedom of choice and not less freedom of choice, keep it out of the government's hands, and the healthcare system is just fine for 80% of the Americans. We need to have a safety net for that 20%.
Okay.
A significant portion of the Wisconsin economy is based on the dairy farm. We've heard dairy farmers complain about the unfair pricing system. We've heard their fears that trade agreements will cause a flood of milk on the market. What do you believe should be done to assist the dairy farmer in remaining or becoming economically a sound business in this part of the state?
And the last response to this question from Chuck Lee.
Well, the family farmer in the 3rd District is basically, you could put those families on the endangered species list thanks to Congress's policies. And you can see why the 3rd District is hurting is because of the milk price. The price of milk is set in Eau Claire. Steve's had 14 years to change that practice and hasn't been able to get it pushed through. But some of the other problems we're having is that right now the farmers are having an integrity problem with the BGH and the BST issue. Only about 3% of them in the 3rd District have decided to use that. I'm totally against our BGH in the milk, and I've testified to a state agency on that issue. But I think we did a bad thing with passing NAFTA. I think eventually that Mexican farmers are going to be competing against 3rd District farmers for shelf space at the local grocery store to sell their dairy products. And I don't see where that's going to be good for the 3rd District farmer. It's going to hurt the price of milk eventually, the price of cheese and other milk products. But I'd like to see us go into using organic farming more too, and get away from a lot of the chemicals that are poured on the crops now, and that would be a big help.
Have to stop you there. Well, the question has come back around to me, and as a member of the media, I spend a lot of time with people and listening to them tell me what they think of the media. And so I'm probably opening myself up here. But I'd like to hear from each of you, your assessment of the media's coverage of your various campaigns. What have they done well? What have they done poorly? All right. Chuck Lee has the next response.
Well, I'd like to see less media bias. It seems like in a lot of cases when you're getting interviewed, they have preconceived notions on issues, the person interviewing you, and they will zero in on that issue and forget about everything else. And when you start talking about the issue they finally want you to talk about, then their pens start writing. Otherwise, they just look at you like you're from another planet. But Mark was right on the primary issue. There was 8 people in the primary, and yet the Leader Telegram up in Eau Claire only covered 6 of the candidates, and gave them the nice, fluffy, one-page profile to. So Mark and I were left out. So that kind of put us at a disadvantage now that we're into the final here. That means that Steve and Harvey have one up on us on the fluff pieces. But since Steve's the incumbent, he gets a lot of free press out there, because every bill that comes through, they ask his opinion on it. So naturally, instead of coming around and asking all of us, it's more convenient just to ask him. But I would like to see the media be more open-minded and not just come in from what I would appear to be a more liberal perspective on a lot of the issues, and listen with an open mind, and then report the facts and not just what they want to hear.
It wasn't as painful as I thought it could be. I'd like to move on to the rebuttal portion of our forum this evening again.
Okay, I wanted to finish up on my portion of the agricultural, my Family Farm Preservation Act of 1995. I would like to see senior farmers, retired farmers, get involved with mentoring and be used as a resource to help the young farmers that are just coming up. It doesn't seem like we have that. We need a pool of those retired farmers that can help teach a farmer, the young farmers, the right way to farm. And another part is, you might ask, how are we going to fund all this? Well, right now we're sending a lot of money overseas to countries and to dictators that really don't deserve that money. And I'd like to see some of that foreign aid money diverted back to be used for the family farms, not only in the 3rd District, but throughout the whole country. I think they're more deserving than tin pot dictator.
Clean Water Act, the Safe Drinking Water, and the Superfund law all have been before Congress in recent months. What, if anything, should Congress do to make these laws better? Should they keep them as they are, or should lawmakers offer far-reaching amendments which might change the laws or broaden their scopes?
Chuck Lee.
Well, we definitely need clean water, and we need safe drinking water. It's the lifeblood of everybody in this room. We have to have it to survive. But one thing we got to remember is, mom and dad government out there just doesn't have a bottomless pit of money that we can reach into. So we have to find ways to continue to pay for these programs. Now, one of the easy ways we can do it, I talked about earlier, would be to use less chemicals, less pesticides, less harsh fertilizers, less poisons on the farming, on the crops we grow in this country, because those poisons get down into the earth, and then the rains wash them down in. Eventually, they get into the drinking water, and then you hear about farmers saying our water has got poisons in it. We're getting sick. The guy down the road's getting cancer. So let's start talking about prevention and start thinking about how many chemicals we're putting on the earth to begin with, and possibly we won't have to remove those chemicals later. But let's also think about where we're going to get the money to do anything. And I do support the present laws that are on the books in the clean water area and the safe drinking area.
We're back around to Sandra Harris for another question, and the first answer will come from Chuck Lee.
I'd like to have you talk a little bit about your campaign financing and campaign reform. First of all, what do you expect to spend on your own campaign, and how adequate and fair is that, given the fact that each of you are affiliated with parties of varying financial backing, let's put it that way. And also, are there any other campaign reforms that you would like to see accomplished?
I'll take that one first. I think that political action committees and special interests, I think that should be totally outlawed. I think it should be made against the law for them to give money. I consider it legalized bribery, because it does tend to influence the people that they give the money to. This here is a printout of some of the PAC money that Steve Gunnarson's got, special interest money, and it just goes on and on and on. And this is just up to August of this year. And me personally, I'm planning on staying under $5,000 because I refuse to take any PAC money or any special interest money. So I'm doing a grassroots campaign. And as you know, the Republicans and the Democrats get the lion's share of the PAC money and the big money because people are trying to buy influence and they want to elect people. Washington is saying this district is targeted, so they're going to be throwing money at Harvey. They're going to be throwing money at Steve to try and keep him in there. Me being in a new party, I'm not going to receive all those funds, and I refuse to take them. So I'd like to see that totally eliminated. Another thing I'd like to see done is term limits, and I don't know how that ties in, but I think if we institute term limits, it will keep down the influence of the big money people that come in and want to buy an election. So therefore, I'm not going to take any of that money, because I think you lose touch with your constituents, the people that put you in office, when you spend a lot of your time in Washington catering to the special interests, the big money people, to get reelected and to find that money for the big TV ads. I'm not running any TV ads because I can't afford it. In a district this big, it's larger than some states, you have to have that TV money.
Moving on, it's my turn for a question again, and I read an interesting opinion piece over the weekend. And politicians, I know over the years, have taken a lot of abuse, and lately it seems like they've taken more of it about being out of touch. It's a phrase that I hear all the time. And the premise of this article is that politicians are very much in touch, and that they have their finger on the pulse of what needs to be done, but that voters are actually the problem, and that they are out of touch. And it's because they respond to issues like crime and issues of the moment that campaigns are the way they are. What do you think about that? And this might be a little self-serving, but are politicians in touch and voters out of touch? And the last response from Chuck Lee.
I think Congress does tend to get out of touch with reality. There's an inside the Beltway mentality and an outside the Beltway mentality. The longer you're in Congress, you tend to start catering more to what they think out in Washington instead of what they think back in your own district. And the longer you stay, you live out there, your children are raised there, and they come back from time to time to get reelected. But most of the action is in Washington. That's where most of the lobbyist groups are. That's where all the special interest PAC money is. And so that's why there's a lot of discontent in not only 3rd District, but nationwide. The polls show it. And people back home are saying that our congressmen no longer listen to us. They no longer represent us. And that's why the vast majority of the country is saying we want change. We want new people in Washington. We want the gridlock to stop. We want some things done. And I would say that the people back home know more of what affects them on a day-to-day basis, how the bills that are passed in Washington affect their pocketbook. They're saying we don't want any more of this. We don't want any more unfunded mandates. We want to be left alone. Let us leave our lives, get government out of our lives, let us do our own thing. And I would say that we know better than the bureaucrats in Washington.
That was our end of our 3rd question there, which brings us back around to the rebuttal period. And as always, you have a minute and a half to rebut, expand on a previous answer, or pretty much say whatever you would like, within reason, of course. Chuck Lee.
Well, I wanted to say something briefly about GATT. The Clinton administration has said that they're going to pass GATT one way or another. And so they came up with this wild idea that they're going to have a lame duck session. So, Steve, you're going to be able to be a lame duck congressman, be able to go back and vote the way you want to on GATT. Now, Pat Buchanan, Ralph Nader, and Ross Perot have one thing in common. They all say this GATT is a bad deal.
We got more than that in common.
This GATT is a bad deal all the way around, and don't pass it. So hopefully, Steve, when you go back as a lame duck congressman, you won't pass that GATT. And hopefully you'll stand up and say this should have never been introduced in a lame duck session to begin with.
Steve, and actually, when we started this forum, I never thought I'd be able to say it, but we're all out of time. We've come to the end of our 2 hours, and believe it or not, we don't have time left for closing statements. So I'd just like to close by taking a moment to thank the candidates for being with us, and I'll get to some of the other things in just a moment. But first, let's take a moment and hear from Dia Olson with the League of Women Voters of La Crosse County.
Thank you, Gene. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the candidates for their participation in this forum. I would like to thank WSU Radio and Western Wisconsin Technical College for their effort in producing this program. It is the aim of the League of Women Voters to encourage the informed and active participation of citizens in government. We hope this forum will help you, the citizen, make your decision on Election Day. Please remember to vote on November 8th. Your vote does make a difference.
Okay, and once again, it's my turn to thank people. First of all, I'd like to thank all of the candidates for taking the time to be with us. 4 candidates in the same room at the same time this close before election time is quite an achievement, and I'd like to thank each of them for taking the time to be with us. I'd also like to thank Dia Olson with the League of Women Voters of La Crosse County for helping to arrange this. I'd like to thank Maureen Kinney for being the timer for tonight's event, and I'd like to thank Sandra Harris with the La Crosse News Network for being a part of the panel tonight. And last but not least, I would like to thank Kevin, Mike, and Jack, and all the crew at Western Wisconsin Technical College for helping to put all of this together. And last, I'll thank me for being here. And thank all of our listeners for being with us as well. I'm Gene Purcell. Thanks for being with us. Good night.
Gentlemen, this is Fred Stafford speaking to you on the Cow Report, and we have an important guest, a former candidate for the 3rd Congressional seat here in Wisconsin, Don Brill. And we're going to be talking about the coming election. And Don, you want to say hello to the viewers?
Good to be here, Fred. Thank you for inviting me. The first thing I think I should do, I suspect that my position on issues won't have the impact that it might have had. But I want the folks to know that a lot of the publicity that took place during my campaign was untrue. I was accused of lies in my campaign. There were no lies. It was not we who lied. I was accused of anti-Semitism, and that was untrue. The charge was complete falsehood, fabricated for effect, and the person who did it fell out of sight when he found out that I didn't even know he was a Jew until I read the account in the paper. So with that behind us, I hope that that puts some minds at ease. Actually, I think the notoriety increased my name recognition substantially, and I'm not certain that it hurt me at all. It seemed transparent enough so that people of intelligence would see right through it.
That's quite true. And we have some important races coming up, but one thing I would like to say, and I feel quite strong about this, we have to elect people that know right from wrong, and if they don't know that murdering babies is wrong, they don't know that homosexuality is an abomination according to God, and that is wrong also, then they may not be morally qualified to hold office, and we should consider those things when we're voting for them. Look over the candidates closely. We have a number of interesting races. We have a U.S. Senate race here with Assemblyman Bob Welch opposing Herb Kohl. And we also have a governor's race. We have a lieutenant governor's race, attorney general being opposing Jim Doyle, who is the incumbent, being opposed by Jeff Wagner. A fresh new face on the block, and not only that, a man who appears to want to get things done. And we urge the people to look over the candidates carefully and look beyond the rhetoric. You know, it's one thing to appear on little spot commercials on television, and they don't say anything except to give you an impression that they're a nice guy. We don't need nice guys down there representing us. We need people who are going to be able to say no, people who are statesmen. How do you feel about that there?
I agree with you, Fred. Certainly we can't be too careful. I like to say that stewardship is measured at the polls. People that don't fall out to vote are not doing their duty as a citizen. I was very disappointed that the primary drew only about 12% of the voting public from the 3rd District. This is not real, and people who aren't interested in exercising themselves to preserve what our founding fathers have given to us certainly don't deserve the freedom that they have. George Bernard Shaw, cynic that he was, said something that I agree with. He said that democracy is a system that gives people the kind of government that they deserve. And I think as conscientious citizens, we should try to deserve something better than what we have.
That's quite true. And Don, you did quite well here in Eau Claire County and Dunn County particularly, and throughout the district for a first time running for public office. You got a total of 37% district-wise, which is quite phenomenal considering the fact that your campaign was underfunded and you didn't have a well-oiled machine to go to work for you. Plus the fact that, how many? You got 42% here in Eau Claire?
42, 46
46% in Dunn County. You are to be congratulated upon the fine showing that you did make.
There's a principle here, I think, Fred, and that is that money doesn't always triumph over principle. We started with nothing, as you say. We started late. We had no funding, no organization. 8 or 9 other races already had tapped the movers and shakers for their committees. So we even had trouble getting a committee together and finding a treasurer. But things gradually built, and I would say the last 2 or 3 weeks, we had several counties generating, and if we'd held on, if they'd postponed the primary a couple of weeks, I think we could have taken it. But we had no yard signs, no mass mailing, no TV, and our budget of about $11,000 didn't do too bad against the hundreds of thousands that were stacked against us.
That's very good. Now, we do have still a 3rd congressional district race with the incumbent, of course, is Congressman Steve Gunderson, and Assemblyman Harvey Stour from Amory is opposing him. He, incidentally, has been endorsed by Wisconsin Right to Life. He's quite liberal in his spending support for legislation. In addition, you have Chuck Lee, who's running on the Taxpayers Party, and you also have Mark Weinhold, who is running as an independent. And perhaps we should concern ourselves more with this race than talk about some of the other things.
Yeah, Fred, there's one thing that occurs to me that I think some viewers would be interested in, and that is the logic of homosexuality. There's a growing belief that it has genetic origins. Now, I would like to point out that all of us have genetic differences. It makes us unique. But we've been given intelligence and self-discipline by which we can overcome these anomalies and be the kind of person we want to be. Logic alone will rule out some of the assumptions. It's very difficult to separate genetics from imprinting, bonding, and brainwashing. Once those things take place, you can't tell the difference because it's so profound in its impact on the person. But one logical point is that any dysfunctional gene tends to die out. And since homosexuality affects procreation, logic says that it should die out. Another aspect of this is the fiction of Project 10, the idea that 10% of the population has this problem. That's not true. Recent studies show that it's between 1 and 2% at the most. Kinsey is responsible for the 10% figure, and he drew 25% of his population from the prisons. He found that 44% of the convicts had homosexual experience. How do we jump from 1% to 44% if it's genetic? It has to be a matter of acculturation and training and early imprinting.
Yes, keep on going.
Yeah.
You can follow through on that.
Well, certainly we are very distressed with the movement that's coming out so prominently, affecting our schools, involving our kids and our grandchildren. Particularly, there's a group that is trying to get pedophilia approved. It's anti-family. We simply cannot endure some of the things that are going on. In my campaign, I indicated that I would not attack the person or the lifestyle, and I didn't. But I did deal with issues, and of course, issues are abound in this area.
All right, we have a call here on line 1. Let's see what our caller has to say. You're on the air, caller.
Okay, hello, Fred.
Howdy.
Ray Beminister, also known as the Common Man.
Yes, there, Randy.
Yeah, I'm going to comment on a few things here, a little bit on everything here, I guess. As far as Don Brill there, your guest, I was kind of thinking, you know, about that. He made such a big deal over some of the things he said there, like that Jewish remark and all that. And I got a friend who's sitting there back in the studio there, who, for the fun of it, calls me Polak, and I don't mind that a bit. And I'm trying to figure out why. And it still bothers me to this. It kind of bothers me a lot, really. that they made such a big deal over that.
They were trying to discredit him, and some people will go to any end to accomplish what they want done.
Yeah,
Including a lie.
I know. That's the thing that is.
And you know, I was up at Rice Lake. I heard that comment, and I attached no significance to it.
I know. It's just like I said. It's like I say. It's like I say. I'm getting. I could say. Well, it's Roy in the back room in there, but he's been calling me that for a long time. It's not, like I say. It's no big deal to me. I got a little bit in there in the background heritage there somewhere, and like I say, it's no big deal to me. Now, going back here to all the video that we had here with Chuck and everything, I said I couldn't help not only when Chuck was talking, especially on certain things there, and Gunderson was really looking at him. I got a feeling he's a little bit worried that he's going to get beat.
I think you're right.
I don't know if Chuck can beat him or not. If he doesn't, it's probably Stour will probably end up winning maybe. But the thing is that Gunderson looks worried, and he should be. He kind of deserves it too for going left hand on so much things there, left wing. And another thing here, I got another comment on somebody else here. I guess you haven't mentioned him too much here, but the one of the state senate races here between Rod Mullen and Jim Hellman.
Yes.
I today happened to see his little traveling machine there. It's an old school bus, and I thought, well, maybe I would get a chance to finally meet this guy, because all he's been doing mostly, like he's talking about these brief commercials here where you just take a look at them and see what they say some things, and that's about it. Well, I was trying to pin him down a little bit on the abortion issue, and what he said was basically what he was saying is he doesn't like to see the government get involved in it at all. Now, he kind of talked like he was pro-life, but he didn't really say one way or another about, trying to make, say, an amendment or anything like that, because according to him, apparently that isn't something that should be done with government. So,
that's Jim Hellman you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
I vote, he just barely eked out victory, though, in the primary there over Helmut Fritz, and
Yes.
I got to admit, I stuck up for him in the primary. And I don't know. I mean, it's kind of hard to say there for 100% there on Mr. Hellman as far as if he's a real true pro-lifer or not. If he's not willing to,
right.
It sounds to me he just doesn't consider it a government political type issue. He just kind of right. He sounds like he's pro-life, but he doesn't sound like he wants to commit to making an actual vote. I suppose if a vote, he did kind of give a hint that if a vote actually came up, he'd probably make one. But he just, almost sounds like almost sound like he was hedging. But
yes.
Unfortunately, I hear that an awful lot from a lot of them. And
okay.
And by the way, I gotta say something. Chuck is probably giving Gunderson a little bit too much credit as far as Gunderson's past voting on abortion issue and things like that. Because I got the paper that Pat Robertson people put out there, and they list some of the things on there having to do with that and related matters, and Gunderson's percentage is more like about 57% rather than 75.
Right.
That doesn't sound. That's not too good in my book.
Okay, Randy. Thanks for the call.
Okay.
Bye now.
Bye.
Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Hello, Fred. Dr. Brill. I'd like to ask a question on the homosexual issue. The thing is, they don't tend to bring up the diseases that these people carry and that they pass on. So with Steve Gunderson voting to put sodomites in the military, it's, to me, a little disgusting. And I wonder if you could comment on some of the diseases such as hepatitis, gay bowel syndrome, AIDS, maybe a few of the other ones that these people tend to carry, and pass on through their anal sex.
Yeah, it's a crying shame that we have to put up with that sort of thing. One comment that I have made to other callers is that, in my view, the people who are infected with AIDS or some of these other terrible diseases should be the most outraged with the way that the AIDS epidemic has been handled. It was neglected and lied about, and the people were taken by surprise. Official response to the whole thing was that it very limited in how it could be propagated, and actually the virus was given human rights instead of treated as a disease. And it was a comedy of errors from start to finish, and for 10 years, and now we have it shot through the public. I like to say that we now have serial killers throughout the population, and they don't even know who they are because it's illegal to test them unless they come forward.
That's true, and I would like to see the Leader Telegram, as long as they've done a number of articles, basically kind of puff pieces on the homosexual issue, that they would get into some of the diseases that these people carry, and one reason that we don't want them in the military. And I hope if Chuck is elected that he'll try and reverse what Clinton and Gunderson are pushing through.
Right.
I guess that'd be all I have to say.
Okay, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Bye.
Got anything else you want to say?
Sure, go ahead.
Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hey, Fred.
Good evening.
I thought that was a pretty ignorant comment that last guy just made about gays in the military. I'm personally not, but the gays in the military issue is so stupid that you wouldn't allow a person not to defend your country because of their sexual orientation. Even with the diseases, there's virtually no way they're going to get passed on in the military. I mean, from day-to-day life, they're not going to get passed on.
All right, would you like to comment on that, Dr.
Well,
Bill?
yes, I would. I think the position that has been taken and has been traditional is that don't ask, don't tell. And it was the effort to make them come out that became objectionable. I'm sure that there were homosexual people that served in the military with me, but they kept their own counsel and behaved normally and didn't come on to me or anything like that, and it was no problem. President Clinton has tried to make a distinction between status and behavior. I say that there is no distinction. Once you declare your status, that is behavior, and the problem is there. If they keep their own counsel and behave themselves in private, there's no problem. If they come out and affect other people, particularly through schooling and associations of various kinds, and heaven help us, pedophilia, these we cannot countenance.
Pedophilia, no idea what that is.
Adult sex with kids.
Oh, well, even, I mean, homosexuals, that's a disgusting thing that they do, but they don't all do that. I mean, there's straight people that would go out and do that, and I mean, I can't believe an educated man like you would even come out on a subject like this. Just
Well, it's true. The Scouts from 73 to 81
discharged over 1,400 Scout leaders for molesting Scouts. Now, they're out there, they're doing it. Jeffrey Dahmer was one who molested youngsters, and anybody could get his hands on. You had John Gacy, another serial killer who molested many boys, and there are a number of others. So it's there. And
it's just a sick few, though. You know, I mean.
You know that most of the veterans organizations in the country oppose the admission of the homosexuals to the military, starting off with the American Legion, the VFW, the DAV, the AMVETS, the Catholic War Veterans, Military Order of the Purple Heart, and many others down the line. And they all did it for a reason, not...
Close-minded ignorance.
No, they know more about it than
the people who sometimes call in on this program.
Do you realize that there's a national organization for the promotion of pedophilia? The North American Man-Boy Love Association is what they call it.
I heard of that, and that's really disgusting.
Yeah,
I mean,
terrible.
Don't let those in the military, but
We don't even want to talk about it.
it's sick. I believe that, you know.
We're going to have to be going off the air because it's just about that time.
All right.
Thanks for your call.
All right.
Sure.
Get it in.
If there's time,
Hello
sure.
there.
Hello there, Fred. How are you doing?
All right, you got a quick question there?
Um,
Comment?
Yes, I do. This would be as to the content of commercials. You're talking about AIDS and everything.
Yes.
What people need is information. And the majority of the commercials I've seen where they say like to use condoms,
Yes.
protected sex, they don't show the ramifications of not using them. You never see a commercial where it shows people dying of AIDS, the ways that you can die from AIDS. You know, and that's something that's very graphic. That is to send an important signal to the viewer. We don't have that. We need that. Another thing on the federal level, the biggest deterrent we have for the extreme penalty of committing murder is death, yet we don't show the people just what it's like to die, to pay the ultimate price.
Right.
These are some of the things we need. I hope that in some fashion, if he's elected or whoever is elected, that they'll get some input into that, show people reality. That's what life should be. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye now.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The program, The Cow Report, is over for tonight.
Thank you, Fred.
Thanks
Thank you,
for
folks.
tuning in, and thank you, Don, for
Thank you.
your comments.
Thank you.